Welcome to How to Write a Book in 90 Days. This is week 4, and we are blueprinting. In fact, this is part 2 of the blueprinting process. And so I'd love to just take a few breaths, start by sacred space. So I'm going to invite you to breathe first into the heart. Breathe into the belly. And a deep breath into the base. So as we do the setting of the sacred space, we're calling in our allies and really honoring that writing a book is a co-creation with all kinds of invisible inspiration. So the roadmap for today is that we're going to talk first about why we're blueprinting again. Like we have to keep reminding ourselves so we can recommit. I've got a life hack on how to channel your book, followed by diving into steps 4 and 5. Last week we covered 1, 2, 3. Now we're doing 4 and 5. And then I'm going to go over a Q&A that I had with the past, various writing students, and that should answer some of the questions that you have before we get to the homework. So when we ask ourselves, why we're blueprinting, the quick answer, of course, is that the time that you take on a map to figure out where you are going saves you massive amounts of time being lost in the territory, the field. But it's important to remember that no matter how immensely detailed the map is, it's not the territory. So another metaphor is actually that there's the blueprint's the skeleton. And right now, as we look at each other, you don't see the bone structure. What you see and appreciate is the skin and the hair. And when your readers get your book, they're not even going to know you had a blueprint. If you do your work well, the blueprint actually becomes invisible, and it just inspires you to add the flesh and the texture to it. So, this couple of weeks of planning may be really laborious, and it might be just very linear, and you want to flow and you want to play. But I want to remind you that when I'm doing shamanic retreats, that I take a long time to create a container, to do the social agreements, to teach boundaries. And part of that kind of structural skeleton is what allows the magic and the mystery and the flow, to come through later. So your book ultimately may not even follow the blueprint as you plan it, but the time you spend blueprinting is never wasted, because it's like foreplay. It's like you spend 2 weeks, dating and getting to know your book and imagining what the book is like when you really get in bed, so it's a little bit like anticipation and the ripening and the flirting with your muses, and so that you get eventually a burst of all the excitement of writing, so you really get into it. And the alternative is, if you just started writing right now, you might have this really premature burst of energy, and then you either burn out or not know who, it'd be like a one-night stand where you get blocked after that. And so we're building creative stamina in these couple of weeks of planning the book, but not actually writing the book. So now, where are we? You've already outlined, and in the last 2 weeks, we covered the following. Step 0 or O, so that's for outlining. So that's where you take each chapter and you come up with 18 points. And then step 2 is where you turn it into significant statements. And by the way, I'll just back up. on the outlining, because some of you may still be outlining, but if you are, like, these points can be personal narratives, case studies, favorite quotes, practices on how to do something, phrases, dialogue, they just pieces that you want to make sure that go into that chapter. And one of the questions I got right offhand about the outlining, you know, it's like 18 points is so subjective. And yeah, my 18 points are going to be different than my co-author's 18 points. And the important thing is that you think each point is something you could write about for at least 5 minutes. And if not, each point is a page, because at that point, you know, you don't want 18-page chapters. If it's like, ooh, this point is going to take me 3 pages to describe, then break it down to smaller points, okay? So it's less than a page each point. That should help you in the question of what is a point. All right, next, step 1 is making a significant sentence or statement, right, for each item. And this is a process of asking yourself, what's significant about this point? And you write that out in a sentence. Another question I got is like, is this a sentence that's going to go in the book? And like I said, don't worry about the flesh and the bones and the syntax. It can actually just be, yeah, it's what's significant. What's the main point of what I'm writing about in this statement? You're describing the purpose of this point, really. Then step 2, you're going to cut 3 of these statements. So we're practicing the art of concision. You're throwing out, you know, the obvious ones. Step 3, you're organizing them in the best order, because a good storyteller takes us on a journey that makes sense. Okay, so now we come to the content of this video. And before we go into step 4 and 5, I want you to self-assess, like look at the work you did and say, how many chapters did I do the 18 points for? How many did I do the statements for? How many did I do, you know, the cutting and the organizing? So that, you know, ideally you've done that for all your chapters, and then you go into step 4. And by the way, some people do it a chapter at a time, and you'll find your own way through it, but I'm recommending at this moment you self-assess where you're at. And the next step is to turn each significant statement into a question using our 5 sexy muses. So you remember our who, what, when, where, why, how. And you may be wondering, why do I want these questions? You know, I have this statement first, and why do I have a question? Or why can't I just take the point and make that into a question? And I'm telling you, there's a method to the madness, and the method's really profound. I want to give you the example of most of, like, the world's best channelers. If you've ever heard of Abraham Hicks, who's Esther Hicks, like a Midwestern woman who, you know, didn't even believe in spirit guides, and then she started getting these visitations by, you know, group called ascended group called Abraham. And Abraham's one of the world's most popular, most successful channels. And there have been channels throughout the years, throughout the ages. But one of the things that Abraham does is she stands on a stage and opens it up to the audience and says, who's got a question? And so what'll happen is people from all over the world will ask, like, here's what I want to know about life, about relationship, about money, about whatever. And then they channel. Now, the reason I believe Abraham is so successful is because Abraham understands that the mind, the reticular activating system, that we respond best to inquiry, to questions, better than statements. And then, oh, let's just sit around and have a discussion. It's like, no, questions actually inspire us to speak. And it's not coincidental that Neale Donald Walsh, who's also a channeler and wrote Conversations with God, would basically ask God questions. And it's through the asking of questions and God coming through that book just revolutionized what people, you know about how we can access higher states. And it's because of magic of questions. So this is the life hack you know, that the blueprint accesses. And I have this experience all the time. Well, in my experience recently, because I had these 2 books about published and I'm being interviewed by radio shows and talk shows, if somebody says to me, for example, tell me about your sex life, I'd be like, okay, where do I start? But if they ask me something specific, the kind of question that will elicit inspiration, like what's your favorite position, or what's the worst sex you ever had, like a good interview asks good, substantial, specific questions, and then it elicits like juicier answers. So part of our process in the blueprinting, turning these questions into specific, significant statements, is to actually inspire our own genius. And this is not woo-woo, like this is also how the scientific method works. Having a specific hypothesis, having a very like well thought out question makes all the difference in science. And we have, you know, tons of reported cases of scientists who go to bed wondering, passionately thinking about something specific, and then they wake up with the answer. So we're actually employing the reticular activating system of the brain as we craft these questions with a who, what, when, and why. So these W's are like aids that will help us think multidimensionally. And sometimes it takes asking yourself who, what, when, or why about the question, multiple ways of asking. You take the significant statement, you ask it multiple ways. It's almost like turning a Rubik's Cube. And so I'll give you, you know, an example. Like, you know, okay, so I had in my book, in the chapter I'm writing right now, I'm talking about agreeing to agree as opposed to agreeing to disagree. It's one of my points. And to turn that into a significant statement, it's agreeing to agree transcends the conventional wisdom that it's okay to agree to disagree. And then when I want to ask a question, I might say, well, who taught me that? Who taught me agreeing to agree? You know, you write the sentence out, but who is the question? And I might say, what significance does this philosophy have in my life? And I might say, when did I learn that? Or where can this apply to our relationships? And the reason I'm suggesting, I'm suggesting you only write one question per point, but by asking yourself multiple who, what, when, where, whys, you're going to come up with the best question. Now, what makes the best question? It's the question that you're most inspired to answer, to like explore, to that the answer of that question is actually what you want to offer to your reader. So this may sound like a mind bender, but it's really what geniuses do. Like a genius doesn't think inside the box. A genius looks at it from different perspectives, looks at it inside out and outside. And so we're asking you to take your book and consider asking a question that's going to actually elicit the answer that you want to share with the audience. So we do that with these five sexy W's and an H. And you know, eventually the practice becomes very easy to do once we know the qualities of our different muses. So who, usually, if you ask a question with who, it usually elicits something about the character, about the person. What is more about the description or the conflict itself. When is like the trigger or an episode or a specific time. Where, you know, if you want to write about where, then you're creating a scene, right? Where why gets us deeper into the motive and into the purpose or the meaning. And finally, how is, if you got, like we do, a how-to book, you use the question how when you're doing procedural stuff. So you're going to take your statement, you're going to turn it into a question, and you want to choose you know, the right question that will inspire you to write for about 5 minutes, and offering the juiciest, you know, answer and information. So, let's see, like the ultimately, this process of questioning, the time you take to contemplate in these different questions is going to make you more intimately acquainted with the material you want to share. So that's why it's valuable to take the time to get the right question. Step 5. Once you have the right question, you get to do the funnest part of the whole blueprinting process. Okay, so this is really fun. This step 5 promises that we don't tell our readers, we show. Like some of the tried and true deepest writing advice is don't tell, but show. Because step 5 is where we take the question, we close our eyes, and we feel into the, like we can even see in our mind's eye the picture, the answer, the juice. We feel using all of our senses. And then we come up with 3 power words that best describe the answer to the question. Now, we don't want to answer the question in 3 words. We want to come up with 3 like inspiring words. And I'm going to give you some examples here. But you know, the intention of the question is not, you never want to ask a question that's yes or no, because if the answer is yes or no, you're not going to write juicy material. You don't want to try to answer the question in 3 words. You want to have 3 words that inspire you to write even more than you thought before. So what is a power word? Okay, I'm going to give you some examples. It's sensual, it's potent, it touches the reader, creates an emotion. So here's just some examples, right? Sand pit, butterfly, bordello, willow, fingernails. Like if I say the word elephant and then I say, don't think elephant, you can't not, right? Power words, all of a sudden, you know, if you're in quicksand, a drain, or you're, you know, whatever word that actually grabs somebody and takes them on a mini journey. And the somebody you're grabbing is not even your audience, it's you. It's going to take you on a writing journey. And I want to caution you, because a lot of times we think, ooh, power words, it must be emotion. So the word might be fear or love or happy. Those are not power words. That's actually reporting on feelings. And reporting on feelings is not the same as feelings, because what love feels like in my body might be totally different than what love feels like in your body. So instead of saying the word fear, we might say noodle, because my knees felt like they were noodles. I was so afraid, right? Like it's that kind of visual. And also, just a writing tip, you know, these power words keep us away from simple descriptors like is, does, was, which bring up no imagery, whereas we say tripped or sailed or sashayed or skipped. Like we want to be very colorful in our language in order to engage and make love to the readers. So the way that this final piece works is you've got your entire chapter broken down into questions now. You take a moment, you feel it, and you see these 3 words and you write them down. And then you go to the next question, you feel it, you write the 3 words. Next question, feel it, write the 3 words. Like it's a really fun, beautiful like journey to start to see your chapter come alive. And so ultimately, next week, where we're going is in how to do a 5-minute chunk of writing. Now, I'm not going to get into that now, but I will say that these 3 words, you know, are intended to inspire you to write like colorfully and to stay really alive and potent. And I'll take you through that journey next week. I can't wait for that. The other key is that we're going to be writing as fast, like quantity, and not worrying about the quality. So the point of the power words is that you want to be sharper and stronger and prolific and colorful when you write, and these will ensure that your answers are not just boring text. So that brings us to the part of the class where I want to review some of the questions I've gotten, some Q&A, and specifically on the members only page, I'm going to keep a audio from an old class, and it starts at 29, at like timestamp 29, where people ask me questions and I take them through it. And I'm going to suggest that if you're confused or you need more coaching, that you listen to that as well. But if you get what you need from this, or writing me on, on Thursday on Facebook, great. Here's some of the questions I've gotten in the past. Let's see. Okay, so how do you use this method if you want to offer a metaphor? Okay, so in the metaphor, for example, let's take a metaphor I've already used. A blueprint is like a skeleton. So my point might be skeleton, and I'm changing it into a significant statement. Well, what's significant about that? I might say blueprint is like a skeleton because you don't actually see it. It's underneath. And then I take it and I turn it into a question, and I might say, how is a blueprint like a skeleton? Anytime you have a metaphor, that's perfect. How is blank like blank, right? And then my final step, which would be really fun, is I would close my eyes and I would see, like, I'd say hair, and then I might say roadmap, and I might say invisible, because those are 3 power words and they inspire me to write about it more. And the next question I got is, a lot of times people will have their points, and they'll be like, hey, what's significant about that point? And their point's already a significant statement, and that's okay. And sometimes their point's already a question, and that's okay. So it's almost like sometimes you get to the organizing and you're already organized. It's in the perfect order, and that's fine. You don't have to do extra work if you've already done a good job on outlining. But it's also okay to do a lot of extra work, because like I said, time spent rearranging and grooming and playing with all these different points is valuable time. So one of my authors, published authors now, Seva, wrote a book about emotional fluidity. He was writing at that time. And we worked together on this example, and I just want to offer it, that emotions are like energy. That was or just energy was his point. The significant statement is we shouldn't fear emotions because they're just energy and they always flow. Okay. Now make a question that inspires him to elaborate. How does adopting the philosophy that emotions are just energy help you in relationship? So you can see how this question is going to actually start to fill out, and to which he could then ask himself, close his eyes, and come up with colorful power words. I did a similar process with Crystal Dawn, who was writing a book on pleasure, and I just wanted to share the example that her point is pleasure trap. And what's significant about that is that getting caught in a pleasure trap is dangerous. Her question is, what happened when I got caught in a pleasure trap? And then she closed her eyes, imagined 3 power words that best describe the answer. Okay, you're not trying to answer the question in 3 words. You're trying to come up with the ones that will best describe the answer. And she came up with drain, greed, and contraction. And then move on to the next question and do that process. So wanted to give you a few examples. I also posted on the group a fiction example from 52 Fridays where I took a chapter and I went through the whole blueprint, and a nonfiction example. And so I'm going to give you from my nonfiction, Art of Relationship Mastery, 1 point, okay? Sorry, I'll take it all the way down the 5 steps. Point O for outline is beyond NVC. Step 1, I asked myself, what's significant about this point? It's important not to get caught up on the process of NVC, but to dive into the heart and soul that's beneath it. That's what's significant. That's the message I want to, essentially give. So then, step 2 is cutting to 15 points. Step 3 is putting them in order. And then I get to step 4 and I ask myself, how do we go beyond the process of NVC into the heart and soul that is beneath it? And step 5, my power words are frequency, portal, soul contract. It doesn't have to make any sense to you, but as the author, I know what I will share when I start to write out for 5 minutes the answer to these questions. So that is a nonfiction point, and a fiction point works very similarly. I've got a simple point that my 2 characters, Raven and Violet, are in a DS relationship, and at one point they try to switch roles. I ask myself, what's significant about this point? Well, Violet tries to dominate Raven, even though it's not in her nature. Then I have to change it into a significant question, like, what happens when the women try to switch? And my answer is, I have a whole scene in my head, but the power words are clumsy, fake, and forcing. So you get a kind of a transmission or a taste of what this process is like. And I've got another question. Yeah.
I know you're talking about quantity.
Come closer. And
yeah,
I might have
quantity
to
versus quality. At this point, is it possible, I know we haven't shifted over to the quantity versus quality. Right now, we're in the quality. We want quality. Can we spend too much time on this stuff, like crafting the questions and crafting those special words? Can we go too far into that?
Yeah, good. So Michael's question is about, we're in the process of building this framework, and I'm suggesting that you can actually do this entire blueprint in a week's time. I know that I've given you 2 weeks, but it's totally possible to slam it out in 10 hours. Now, if you're in a myopic, perfectionist mode and you're like, 10 hours and I've only gotten 2 chapters done, chances are you're probably going too detailed. It really is possible to do a whole blueprint for a book, in a week. And we have 2, maybe even 3 weeks to do it. So when Michael asks about the distinction between quantity and quality, I want to share with you guys that so much of the magic happens when we do this quickly and not be a perfectionist. So if you just start, playing with these questions and statements and power words and don't overthink it, and you just do the work, you trust that your guides are with you. And my favorite quote about quantity versus quality is actually by Julia Cameron, and it's a prayer. It's knowing that our creativity leads us closer to our creator, then we surrender, ourselves as the secretaries, and we say, God, I'll take care of the quantity. I'm going to do this blueprint, and you take care of the quality. So your blueprint might be 10 pages long. I don't know, it'll be different for different people, but it might be it's not going to be, it's just 15 questions and then power words for every chapter. And so you might have, okay, I'm going to write these 10 pages of this blueprint. Maybe it's 20 pages, maybe it's 5, but you've got this blueprint. And if you do the quantity of it, God will take care of the quality. That's the contract. So this brings us to the end of our Q&A, and I want to start focusing on our homework. So the essence of the homework is to buff up your blueprint. So I'm going to ask you one question. Actually, there's one exercise you're going to do. And that'll be step 1 of the homework. But step 2, is to finish making your significant statements. Step 3 is to contact your accountability buddy and, get in touch with them. You're also going to rewrite your significant statements into questions. And then step 5, or homework assignment 5, is to do step 5 and do the power words. Okay. So you're very, very close to creating a whole map for your book. And I want you to keep thinking in terms of what value, you're bringing to the world as you do this. Like, yes, it's a deep personal growth process, but I want you to think about your market, about your audience. And so the first homework assignment that I have, in addition to finishing your blueprint, is to write this question down. What kind of people will benefit from my book? Okay. And then I want you to close your eyes, and what are the 3 words, power words, that best describe the answer? Like, think of, the color, or the gender, or the where they are in the world, or, what they've been through, and just put 3 words down. Take another breath. Okay, now what's going to happen as your homework assignment is you're going to set the timer, and you're going to follow these rules, which I will print up. I'll type up as well. So you're going to, 1, you have to write as fast as you can for the 5 minutes. 2, you have to absolutely stop when the timer goes. No writing for 6 minutes. You have to stop at 5. 3, you have to use all 3 power words. And even more challenging is you have to start with one of those power words. Like, the first word you write down is one of them, and then just keep writing. And you can change it a little bit. Like, if your power word is mother, because that's what came to mind when you were doing it. And when you want to do it, you want to say mothering, or so you can change it to a verb or an adjective, or change it a little bit. But the idea is you write these 3 power words as soon as you can in the 5 minutes, starting with one right at the front. And then when you stop, when your timer goes off, you're not allowed to judge it. Again, God is taking care of the quality. Who are we to judge what we write? Your job is to be like, okay, did my homework. Now let me go on to blueprinting. So it is valuable for us to start tuning in to who we're serving, who we're writing these books for. So that is why we have that homework. I look forward to working with you next week and taking this writing exercise that I just did. It's called a chunk, and taking you into the world of chunking out this book, because essentially once you have a whole blueprint, the book can write itself. It can start, if you have done all 5 of these points for all of your chapters, then it's like a magical map for a book that's really going to write itself. So looking forward to talking to you then.